Okay, shall we start? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining our panel. Let me do the introductions first. I'm Mario Todino from Jones Day, and I will be moderating this panel. So let me tell you what we have on the program. As you know, we will be discussing, we don't have the crystal ball yet, actually, but it was supposed to come, because we will be discussing here the agenda of the new Commissioner for Competition. So what will be the priorities, what should be the priorities, and how possibly competition enforcement, right, will evolve over the time. We have two great panelists. To my left, Andrea Pezzoli is Deputy Secretary General of the Italian Competition Authority, one of the pillars of the institution. And then we have Francesca Micheletti, who is Senior Correspondent of Politico. Politico is the news service, I would say, right, of the EU bubble. So she knows inside out all the EU affairs and matters. Logically enough, we have no DG Comp representatives. It would have been embarrassing. They declined our invitation. And logically enough, because of course we will try to guess what they will do, and we will try to be very, very candid. The format is very simple. It's going to be an informal chat, questions and answers, and at the end, we will also try to take questions from the audience. Right now, without further ado, let me start, perhaps, to set the stage. Okay, so Teresa Ribera, as you know, has been nominated new competition commissioner. She's for sure a heavyweight. She's a deputy prime minister from Spain. And nonetheless, she will have to, perform she will have a very difficult task to accomplish this time. In my view, much more difficult than her predecessors. In particular, if you read the high-level indications and guidelines provided by the President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, in her mission letter to Ribera. Perhaps a step back, as you know, Mario Draghi has very recently issued a report on the future of the EU. He has identified a number of problems and related areas for intervention, but he mostly focuses on 3 points, which are very, very important to us, to this debate. Innovation, so he says there is lack of innovation, lack of dynamism in the EU. Then there is a problem of competitiveness, and then there is a problem of security and dependence in general. Okay, these 3 macro areas. And then, of course, he actually goes ahead and put forward a number of, proposals and recipes to fix this problem, including, of course, competition enforcement. This is why these points are important. And by the way, these inputs have been extensively incorporated in the mission letter of von der Leyen to Ribera. Let me just quote very quickly some of the passages of this mission letter. In your responsibilities linked to the competition portfolio, you will modernize the EU competition policy to ensure it supports European companies to innovate, compete, and lead worldwide. And then you have another passage which is very interesting, which enters into the mechanic of competition enforcement, where actually she instructs Ribera to review the horizontal merger guidelines. Okay, that should give adequate weight to resilience, efficiency, and innovation. So these are objectives which, if accomplished, really are potentially capable of disrupting current competition enforcement, right? So against this background, perhaps let's start from the profile of the commissioner herself, and I will start with Francesca. So Francesca, is she fit, in your view, Ribera, is she fit to run this portfolio, given her background, knowledge, political ideas? What is your sense?
Thank you, Mario. Hello, everyone. That's a big question. Well, what struck about Ribera, I think, is her lack of competition expertise, because she has an ironclad CV in terms of climate, energy. She's very, very strong background in that. She has virtually no competition law experience or background. She does have a law education, which kind of made her fit for the role in theory. But yeah, on the level of competence, question mark. What also struck me and strikes people in Brussels is the breadth of her portfolio. It's a very broad one, it's unprecedented. So we have her covering climate transition, energy, and competition. Things that not necessarily go together. What we observe is they may have conflicting objectives at times. So it will be a big challenge, I think, for her to keep this together while trying to coordinate other two commissioners who are responsible for climate and energy. So I think it's a very big challenge, as you say, bigger than the one faced by previous commissioners. She obviously has a very good reputation in her legislation and her previous experience. But to be seen. Now she will face grilling of the MEPs in Parliament. They are already preparing the questions. Let's see how she fares there.
Right. Andrea, perhaps just, regarding this very broad portfolio, right? So where she has actually this green transition, whatever it is, coupled with competition. Is there a risk of a conflict, or even, given that she actually comes from that world, is there a risk that she might actually underestimate the importance of the competition portfolio, right? Do you see that risk?
Okay. First of all, I have to thank Mario for the invitation to this interesting chat, and I'd like to look at it as a sort of fireside talk. But unfortunately, the temperature doesn't allow yet such an image, so there is no far side. The question and the topic of this session, at least for an enforcer, it might seem provocative and uncomfortable for a member of a national competition authority. Nevertheless, it's stimulating, and nevertheless, I'm not so presumptuous and arrogant to suggest to the new commissioner what she has to do. However, so the disclaimer is mandatory. They are personal views, so don't forget it. With a certain degree of hypocrisy, I can provide a quite schematic list of what are the major challenges for the new commissioner to cope with, and of the difficulties that must be overcome to conquer the space that competition should deserve in Europe. Coming back to the direct question raised by Mario, so simplifying it, sustainability and competition, friends or foes? I think that they are friends, but we have to be clear, and this is, I think, the major challenge that she has to deal with. I think that the support that competition authorities can provide for the promotion of sustainability, both environmental and social sustainability, don't forget it, it's a complex term which is abused during this time, is, just continuing to do their main task, which is the protection of the competitive process. Indirectly, as a conscious and virtuous byproduct, there might be benefits for sustainability. I think that when there are distributional decisions, so for instance, benefiting actual consumers in the relevant market or new generations, that are noble decisions, and from a more general point of view, I would agree that we have to promote the new generation as well. But these distributional questions have to be solved by institutions which are democratically selected. We still are independent authorities, so I think that these decisions cannot be taken by an independent authority. And this is true for all the so-called general interests. I mean, I think that the contribution that competition authorities can provide for, generally speaking, I mean, this morning we have heard from Enrico Letta how crucial is the question of competitiveness for Europe, and how crucial is industrial policy for Europe. There is a strong demand, a strong return of industrial policy in Europe. I think that, I mean, as I said, competition is not just first of all, it's not an obstacle. It is not just a constraint. It's something more. It can be an important support, but maintaining the proper role. So I think that the main challenge for the new commissioner, having so many goals in a huge portfolio, is the coordination among these goals without, I mean, the risks of overlapping and without the risk of a mixture which might transform competition policy in something strange. And this is not, and I want to stress it, it is not business as usual. It is not business as usual. We have to, meaning competition authorities, we have to change our attitude. This is particularly true, I think, that we are going to talk about it when we are going to cope with merger control. There is no need for changing rules. There is no need for radical changes. There is need for an attitude which is more, I mean, in the Draghi report, I mean, pages 298 to 306, there are the famous 10 recommendations that might be considered the agenda. I mean, everybody reads the Draghi reports with different lenses. I mean, so we'll see in the next weeks, in the next months, there will be different interpretations of the Draghi reports, from a very Colbertian one, dirigistic one, to a much more competitive one. I think that there is a lot of competition in Draghi's report, but as we heard from Enrico Letta this morning, the first step is the implementation of the single market. Only after it, you can think of a good consolidation and a more flexible approach to merger control with larger markets. If the markets remain national, I think that there is a great risk that industrial policy or the pursuit of general interest could conflict with the competitive process.
If we stay for a second still on this issue of, you know, the potential conflict between different competencies and coming to the mechanic of the way the commission is supposed to work, right, Francesca? So concerning, you know, the distribution and allocation of powers, portfolios, and competencies, we see that the commission is supposed to work now with commissioners overlapping, right, which is already the case now to some extent. And that have caused a lot of discontent, by the way, in the previous commission at the level of staff and officials. But now it's much more pronounced, right? This split of competencies with commissioners overlapping. So what do we expect from that? Is there again a risk of...
Sir.
Why not?
Talking about overlap.
Yes. So yeah, it's been defined a lot in Brussels as the matrix, this new structure that von der Leyen has put in place, because precisely of all these overlaps and intertwines between the different areas of competence. I don't know, an expression which came into my head is divide and conquer, but perhaps that's been a bit too pessimistic. It is challenging. You'll have conflicts between personalities. To some extent, you already had these conflicts we saw, for example, between outgoing Commissioner Vestager and Thierry Breton. So we have had a taste of that already. We'll have the French commissioner who want to have a say on competitiveness, of course, because that is in his portfolio. To some extent, I think the competition community was happy that the competition portfolio was not under the competitiveness umbrella, because the comments I've heard in that sense were that it would have undermined the independence of competition enforcement too much. So in a way, that is good. But yeah, just going back to what Andrea said about the environment, sustainability, it's a bit like we're trying to introduce a public interest test in our merger control and not only in broader antitrust enforcement, and we see that as tricky. I can say a bit more about the merger guidelines as well, maybe later.
If I can add something about, again, I mean, when we say sustainability and antitrust friends of foes, I mean, and usually a lot of literature is about the potential trade-off between sustainability. I haven't seen so many trade-offs. I've seen a lot of cases when sustainability and competition go the same direction. If you make some crucial markets more efficient and more competitive, the indirect outcome for sustainability is absolutely positive. I'm speaking of, let's say, local transport or waste management or electrical mobility. I mean, the more competitive these markets are, the more sustainability you see. So, I mean, usually the trade-off, it seems to be a sort of, let's say, provocation rather than reality. We'll see, possibly in the next years, we'll see a lot of trade-offs, and there are appropriate tools to deal with them.
Right. Or perhaps, so let's focus on this fundamental, potential fundamental conflict between competitiveness and competition, okay? So von der Leyen, in a mission letter, explicitly states that competition policy needs to support European industry in its race to innovate, so competition policy, okay? Needs to, in its race to innovate, lead and compete. So how can these two concepts can be reconciled when it comes? I don't want very general replies. I want to know what is going to be the recipe when it comes to merger control, for instance.
Okay. I'll try to be as concrete as possible, but I have to start saying that finally competition enforcers and economists abandon the ideological position according to which the best industrial policy is none at all, Becker 85. So I think it was merely ideological. I mean, even neoliberalist countries continue to implement industrial policy without naming it. For a long time, I mean, industrial policy was the policy that cannot be named, like Lord Voldemort in Harry Potter, And nevertheless, we saw that in the United States, I mean, because of security, let's call them expenses, they continued to implement industrial policy without naming it. And I think that nowadays, the main challenges for enforcers, for antitrust enforcers, I mean, we have to solve the tension between competition and industrial policy or risk being wiped away entirely. And I'm quoting what Benoît Corier, the president of the French authority, said at the OECD committee talking about the relationship between industrial policy and competition. Concretely, I mean, because the question was aimed at, say, okay, which are the recipe? I mean, the recipe, the recommendation are not so easy, but I think that we have to start with a different attitude concerning merger control, which means two things, concrete things, but challenging. First of all, I mean, in our assessment in the merger control, we have to cope with a wider horizontal, time frame. How do you say? Time frame. Time frame, long-term evaluation, medium-term evaluation. And this is quite important, especially when we talk about efficiency defense, innovation defense, and this is on the side that the business community like, but on the other side, there is another side that possibly the business community likes less, which is the crucial role which plays potential competition. I mean, if you enlarge your time horizon, it means that somebody who today is not a potential competitor, tomorrow might be it. It's fantastic, seems very challenging and sexy. It's very difficult to make it consistent with legal certainty. This is the challenge. At the end of the day, we have to convince the judge, but I think it is not a good reason that since the future is uncertain, to ignore that tomorrow will be for sure different from today. So if we are stuck on today's efficiency, for sure we are making a mistake. So we have to risk to implement the merger control in a more, I'm quoting Draghi, agile and with a more agile approach, which doesn't mean a more indulgent approach. It is as rigorous as in the past, but I mean, economic analysis is not just quantitative analysis. It means that you have to deal with the theory of harm, and I mean, in the long term, in the longer term, we have to focus our attention in a, let's say, longer time horizon. This is the first move which can provide an important support for industrial policy consistent with the wishes made by von der Leyen. There are other things that are cooking in the kitchen, but we'll talk if we have time. I mean, there is the guidelines concerning 102, the new competition tool. There are a number of, and the coordination between digital regulation and enforcement. These are the challenges, and there are the risks. But I mean, I think that we have to start with a different approach concerning the merger control.
Sorry, I didn't want to steal the mic from you while you were speaking. I just got a memory on industrial policy. So when I started writing about antitrust and mergers and competition in 2012, China had MOFCOM at the time, not Summer. And the line I was always getting was, well, China does industrial policy with merger control. And it was like taboo. We don't do that in Europe. We never do that. And thinking about the conversations we're having today, things have really moved on. So today is not taboo to think about industrial policy and competition and merger control together. So I think this is noteworthy, and it shows the momentum that there is at the moment to potentially change or modify the merger rules. In which way, it's to be seen, because I think there are two levels of the debate here. There is a broad level, politicians, industry making a noise about relaxing merger control, and then there is the level of people who really know what they're talking about, like the people in this room, who are much more, I think, blasé about it. Like, what can you really do to change merger control? You can't change merger control to allow for European champions, and then what happens if two US companies want to merge? You have to apply the same regulations. So what do you do? Merger control à la carte? That's not possible. So I don't know which boundaries can be pushed on the merger rules. You will have read the outgoing Commissioner Vestager saying that opening merger rules is like opening a Pandora's box. Who knows if Ribera will have time and energy to open that?
Absolutely. Now, take for example, to say, to talk about very concrete issues that may come up soon, right? How are we going to deal with innovation, right? Because now, I mean, in Draghi's mind and von der Leyen's mind, okay, innovation should actually be spurred by allowing mergers to happen, okay, to reach scale, and possibly, develop innovation. The current policy of DG Comp in merger control when it comes to innovation is that innovation, so the merger between two large companies bringing together two large R&D portfolios is problematic because there will be inevitably a sacrifice, a loss of innovation. Right or wrong? I mean, I'm not very supportive, to be honest, with the DG Comp theory of ARP in innovation, but nonetheless it's there. And you know, if this point had to be fixed now in future merger enforcement, then you would really have a problem in, you know, reversing actually the path and the approach, which is kind of striking, right?
Right. I don't know if it is completely right. I want just to remind all of us that, I mean, innovation is nothing but dynamic competition. So there is not a conflict between innovation and competition. I mean, so this is the first point I would like to stress. The second point is, honestly, I think that in the recent past, the European Commission made significant efforts in assessing, let's say, dynamic mergers. So with the theory of the R&D market, I mean, it was a new kid on the block. So, I mean, they had to adjust their approach. I'm not so critical on the final outcomes. I think, nevertheless, that, as I was trying to say, a longer time horizon would allow to fully consider the potential benefits in terms of innovation of a merger that in the shorter term might raise concerns. So it is also up to companies. I mean, my experience, whenever we talk of efficiency defense, which is a typical issue that the business community raise but I've never seen a proper efficiency defense with some quantitative exercise that can be considered reliable. Usually, I mean, there is a lot of rhetoric about in the near future there will be synergies, everybody will be better off, it's fantastic, but I mean, give me some evidence. I am absolutely available to be convinced if you provide some good evidence. And I think that the challenge about the innovation defense is on both sides. I mean, in order to a change of attitude from the side of the competition authorities, but on the other hand, on the sides of providing some strong evidence that can be used in order to have a positive look of the outcome of the merger. So, right or wrong, not so right, I would say. And I think that the main challenge is to see the outcomes in terms of dynamic competition, which is just a synonymous of innovation. I can add something more. Practically speaking, there is an interesting example of something that can be assessed using dynamic remedies, or in this case, sustainable remedies. For instance, there is an example in Australia when there was a merger, I mean, a sort of merge to monopoly in the electric markets, and the authority, the Australian authority, authorized it just because of a remedy, because, I mean, the two companies promised that they would implement an important an important and green investment plan. Is this the practical way to solve something in the near future? I mean, it is a behavioral remedy. It is very costly to be monitored, and if it doesn't, fully be implemented, what have we to do in order to, which is the deterrence? Okay, I don't know if I've answered your question.
You escaped my question.
Not really.
What was your question again?
I have just 3 comments, if I may say. The first one is that Commissioner Van Miert, when asked about what was the industrial policy of Europe, said that the industrial policy of Europe was competition policy, which obviously the philosophy doesn't mean. The second point is I participated in the drafting of the merger regulation in 1999. It's really a big mess because you have a lot of different pressure and so on. So opening the Pandora box of, particularly in this period, of reviewing the regulation, I think would be a really bad idea. You may do a lot by interpretation. So the real, in a sense, the experiment, the attempt which DG Comp is making with the 102 guidelines, you may like them or not, but it is a way of redrafting the interpretation of the law. Now, 102 is particularly delicate question because what the DG Comp is doing is criticizing the court for some decisions, and we don't know what the court will say. But probably in merger regulation, you may have more ample way of interpreting the law, particularly with the idea of, say, considering potential competition, the dimension of the market. It is very important what Mr. Letta said this morning. The final point, there is an additional point. Now, while going to the merger regulation, the merger regulation review, there have been a lot of studies about the effects of mergers. And these studies were not particularly comfortable for mergers. I mean, do you think that Boeing McDonnell Douglas was a good thing for Boeing? It was not. It was something which allowed the Airbus to get market share because it was a competitor. And probably if you go and review those studies, you would think that there is some reason for thinking that merger control should obviously consider potential competition, the potential competitors and these things, but there's not very much reason to think that it would improve the competitiveness of companies just by merging, say, like Siemens Alstom, just to make an example. Thank you.
Okay, shall we move very briefly to discuss the ongoing reforms? Okay, because there we might see developments. One being, of course, the reform of Regulation 1/2003, the procedural regulation, where there is a lot at stake, right? And that, so one of the potential reforms appears to be the introduction of deadlines for antitrust cases, proceedings. So what is your sense? Because of course, as you know, in Italy, we do have non-mandatory deadlines for antitrust investigations, and they work well, because in fact, duration of the Italian Competition Authority antitrust cases is much shorter. Obviously, you cannot compare an investigation of an Italian competition agency with the cross-border investigations. You have a lot of parties, multilinguistic regimes, tons of evidence, and so on and so forth. And nonetheless, I think that you know, having deadlines, non-mandatory deadlines, would actually help a lot DG Comp to improve, you know, the score when it comes to the efficiency of the application of competition rules. What is your view?
No, okay, just a few words on this question of the deadlines. As you probably know, at least the Italians know, we had the opposite problem. Our problem was, I mean, the starting point. We were too lazy, according to the judges, to launch an investigation. So it appears on the screen, the famous 90 days. So quota 90, but I mean, other times, I didn't like those times. So we have to start within 90 days. As far as the deadline concerning the end, the duration of an investigation, I think that we have to consider it seriously, especially in order to make enforcement as attractive as regulation. I remember during the discussion concerning the DMA, the mantra was we need a timely and quick response, because I mean enforcement it is too late, it's too slow, and we need a timely and quick response. So the deadline could go in this direction. So in this perspective, I'm not particularly against such a. I am against too mechanical deadlines. We need a certain flexibility. We need, I mean, when I speak about national and European competition authority, but I mean, if we consider the duration of the national authorities, not only the Italian one, which is on the average less than 18, 19 months, less than 2 years anyway, if compared with the 7 years of the famous Google shopping case, I think that, I mean, the problem is mainly in Brussels, if you like. And the problem is, I mean, again, and this opens another question concerning the coordination between regulation and enforcement. Because I mean, otherwise, I mean, now we are tempted, not we, I mean, especially in Europe, we are tempted to regulate a lot. I mean, if we look at what's happened in the digital world, there are 7 different regulations. Some of them are almost empty. Some of them are, I hope that they are going to work as efficiently as possible. But I mean, the temptation of regulation is a temptation that should be resisted. I mean, Oscar Wilde said, I mean, I can resist anything but temptation. And since we are a Catholic country, whenever there is a temptation, somewhere there is a sin. So, so we have to be aware of that. So I'm not so critical about the deadline for the duration of an investigation. So.
All right. There is, by the way, for your information, there is also on the table in Brussels the possibility to couple the deadlines with the standstill measure, interim measures, okay? That is the proposal coming from Olivier Gaston, Director General of DG Comp, who said, okay, I would actually be ready to set forth, no mandatory deadlines in my investigation as long as I have a tool to force the companies under investigation to provide in a timely manner the information and the documents that are actually request, because this is one of the problems. The delays in the response to RFIs. And that he thinks that, by having a more flexible, more agile and easier to enforce, if you like, interim measure tool, that could actually compensate for the shorter deadline of the investigation. Francesca, you wanna perhaps something else I will add, because we're actually running out of time. So I think we need to be selective. 1 or 2 is too technical, but perhaps a word on
also too formalistic. Let's say another adjective could be useful.
Yeah. No, perhaps about the digital, DMA in general, this interplay with the competition enforcement. Now, it's time to take stock a little bit. Do we expect changes? Probably not, right?
Yeah, so DMA is one of the topics that Ribera will be asked about in the parliamentary hearings. Like, we're already seeing some drafts of the questions going around, and this is certainly something that she will be asked about. Yesterday there was a great quote from Vestager. Vestager was in the US for a conference, and she was asked whether it was a good idea to keep the DMA split between DG Competition and DG Connect effectively. And she said, it is of course a brilliant idea. but she said it in a very, very ironic way. So, yeah, on DMA, again, the split, I think, is the challenge, you know, with this double hat that it has. But definitely, you know, it's one of the newest instruments, and it will be under close scrutiny in terms of effectiveness. The other one is foreign subsidies regulation, FSR. These two can be considered a success of the Vestager late mandate because she managed to put them in place, but we are to see how they work. So the success was putting them in place. Now FSR, we are slowly starting to see some cases. Yesterday there was an announcement on a merger case, but it will take time to take stock of what it means.
Andrea, digital, I mean, do you want to comment very shortly about
very shortly? Yeah. I mean, I'm curious about how the DMA will work. We hope that the complementarity between enforcement and DMA could be exploited in the best possible ways. I mean, I'm not so fond of the DMA because, I mean, the framework that they used was, I mean, really imported from a homogeneous industry like the telecom, and we all know that the digital industry is not that homogeneous. So the same size size fits all is not a good response. We'll see in the actual implementation of the regulation how it will work. I think that there is space, there is still scope for antitrust intervention in the digital world, because I mean it's a continuously changing world where there will be continuously changing behaviors, and not all the behaviors are included in the famous Article 5 and 6 list. That was the list which was in the fridge, so we took what we had, but I mean it is as examples of the past, no more of the future. So we'll see. I'm quite optimistic that we will find a way to coordinate between DG Comp and DG Connect. Now, I mean, the old commissioner is no more there. Breton is somewhere else, so it's easier what just Francesca said. And there will be space for a coordination between DG Comp and national. I mean, from our side, I think that we have a strong cooperation and a strong story of successful cooperation with the DG Comp. ECN is still an important place where coordinate our intervention. And I still think that, I mean, digital is crucial, but there is a huge motorway that can be, there are a lot of different markets that are equally important for antitrust intervention. It's very cool to intervene in the digital markets, but I mean, the ordinary people are not so much interested in, they're much more interested in public services, in pharmaceutical, grocery, so don't forget it.
Right. Okay, so now the million-dollar question for each of you, the final one, and also to anyone who wants actually to reply. Yeah, so it's very simple. What is going to happen now in your view? I mean, will we assist to revolution or something like a significant, you know, reshaping of the competition policy given, you know, all these guidelines provided by von der Leyen to Ribera? I mean, it's pretty, she has a lot of constraints there, right?
I think something that might probably happen is that they find some quick solution to fix the Illumina Grail defeat. So some kind of modification to the merger guidelines that helps address that gap that I think there is consensus now, by now, that there is, and there is pressure to do that. So there might be some attempt at a quick fix in terms of guidelines on that. On the longer term, I think there will be a lot of discussion, a lot of chatter, a lot of shouting, but I'm really not sure in terms of rules what will change.
Okay, I don't think that the new commission is revolutionary. I think that the problem is the opposite. Is the risk, as Enrico Letta said this morning, is inertia, is the temptation of business as usual. This is what I really, and if something like that happens, I think that for antitrust agencies, it could be a problem because, I mean, the focus is somewhere else on sustainability, ecological transition, industrial policy. We have to find our role without changing nature. So I think that possibly, I mean, using again the Draghi's report, the correct term is revamping and reinforcing competition policy rather than revolutionize. I mean, revolution is not it's not today, and not with this commission, which is not that revolutionary.
Okay, please.
Thank you very much. Just to present myself, I'm Mirta Kaporal. I'm head of a Croatian competition agency. Nice to see you again, Andrea, and thank you for a lot of interesting points that you made. With some, I really agree. First of all, I don't think there is going to be any revolution. I think ECN, as you correctly put it, is a very good format to support the new commissioner as well. Maybe just talking from my personal view, because I'm in the mandate for almost 3 years, so I had a chance to cooperate and talk with Vestager a lot, and I appreciate her very much as a professional and as a person. I think she made a lot of impression on many of us. That's maybe just saying from myself. Point on interim measures, I'm not that convinced actually, because interim measures is something which is exceptionally applied in competition proceedings. So kind of exchanging those for deadlines, I don't see really this happening in practice. I know it's very exciting for the Commission to finally have interim measures because they haven't used them as much as national competition authorities in the past. But as I say, I don't really see that line. What I'm also curious, what Andrea mentioned is in the merger control, like wider time frame, you said, broadening the time frame. But if you see from the point of view of business, I mean, business, we are always too slow for business, that's for sure. You know, lawyers, among them many lawyers here, they was pressuring us, competition authorities, when are going to issue a decision, you know, it's always too slow for the business. So I don't know, how do you see this wider time frame? And we'll see. This is some of my thoughts, just listening to you. And just last point about sustainability, I totally agree with Andrea. We are just shifting the focus from primary role of the competition authority. Trust me, I'm talking from the point of view of a small competition authority. It's demanding to deal, which I will talk later in the panel this afternoon. It's really demanding even to solve these traditional competition cases. Above all, now you have digital. Suddenly you have to think about sustainability. Don't get me wrong, I'm totally in sustainability goals. But I don't really see us applying this, especially not in exchange of competition rules. So we don't take care of sustainability yet. I have to be very honest in our practice. There are only a couple of national competition authorities who are really well advanced in this, like the Netherlands and slightly Austria, well, Portugal to a certain extent, not that much. So we'll see. This is my slight fear that this is going to prevail in a way and to push away the important part of traditional competition. Sorry if I took too much of your time.
Thank you very much. Do you have other questions or comments from the audience? Please.
Thank you very much. My name is Teresa Oriani, and I am a PhD researcher at the European University Institute. I'm working on sustainability and competition law, so of course this talk is very, very relevant. And I wanted to have the impression of you three panelists on what it means from the point of view of both competition policy and sustainability policy that these two portfolios are united in one person in this very particular moment in which the new von der Leyen Commission has said that the priority of the Green Deal is being rolled back. So we are seeing actually a decrease in importance of the Green Deal and maybe also of the sustainability objectives, and instead an increase in importance of objectives that might actually be challenging for the centrality of competition policy, such as, in particular, industrial policy and some there have been some readings of the Draghi report as requiring a more lenient type of competition policy. So I have to say that this coupling of the coupling of these two portfolios in one person, of these two portfolios that are a bit under attack, or in any case, these two portfolios that are in an uncertain situation, has left me, yeah, curious, and I'm curious to know what you think about it.
I'll give you a very short reply, then I'll let Andrea reply, because he's more competent than myself. So I think that, to be honest, I think the level of potential conflict is limited, right? So you have a very, very limited area where I see that there can be sort of conflict, because you need to accommodate both in your policy, and then you have to decide. But it's pretty limited. If you see DG policy that you're certainly familiar with, antitrust and sustainability, there is an issue which is conflicting, which is all these, how you take into account the efficiencies generated by the sustainable agreement. And this is something which is clearly has been identified since a long time, but there are very few cases then in practice. And so at the end, in my view, it's less a problem of conflict than a problem of priority and focus.
Yeah. I mean, starting from sustainability and arriving to the wider time frame, I mean, I agree with the last sentences that Mario just pronounced, and I would like to add something. What I said between the potential conflict of between an independent authority and political decisions is not as strong in Europe, because we know that the degree of independence of the, let's say, European antitrust agency is different. I mean, the governance is different. There is much more politics than at the national level. So if I am afraid when an independent and not elected institution takes some distributional, let's say, decisions, I'm not that afraid that something like that can happen at the European level. So we have to consider it. So possibly it could be a push towards a higher degree of independence in the near future. It's a long debate about the nature of the European Commission, the European Competition Commission. Coming back to the time frame, I think that the wider time frame means that I mean, we don't need to change something radically. We have to change our approach to the assessment. And my main fear is that if we continue to base our assessment on today's efficiency, and we know that today's efficiency is wrong, because tomorrow it will be completely different, for sure we are making a mistake. So we have to take the risk to imagine what is tomorrow's efficiency. And this is true both for merger and for abuse of dominance. Remember the as efficient test. So the as efficient test when competitors are not yet efficient. So, I mean, are you allowed to exclude a competitor that today is not efficient, but tomorrow it will be as efficient as you, and it will be an important competitive constraint? So this is a question mark, and for me it's without a question mark. I mean, if we want to apply the as efficient test, we have to apply it dynamically. Otherwise it's nonsense. And this is the main mistake which is strictly linked with an abuse of the consumer welfare standard, which is mainly based on price and quantity today. So we need a more dynamic approach. This is what I mean for a wider, because otherwise, for sure, we are making a mistake. I mean, with a very sound evidence, which is absolutely useless for tomorrow.
Just a thought on that. My question there is, do sustainability and competition always have to go together? Will they always have to go together? Or will it be a bit like now? So they have some points of contact. We have seen the guidelines on horizontal cooperation. In some mergers, DG Comp claims that it has introduced sustainability as a criterion for market definition. So there are already some points of contact. They are limited in my view. They might increase, but I don't see competition and sustainability going hand in hand 100% on everything. Like that would be too much of a taking nature out of the two.
Absolutely. All right. Do we have other questions? Okay, if there are no further questions, I thank you very much, Andrea and Francesca. I thank the audience. Have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Ma se vuoi